Today we have a number of items on the agenda. Obviously, one of the important items on the agenda is the budget proposals. Right, so the first item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies from any members? We haven't had any yet, anyway. Right, second item, Paula, do we have disclosures of personal prejudicial interest from members? You get legal advice on that, but my advice to everybody is, because this is an overarching budget and we're not dealing with specifics like social services or education, we are actually dealing with the entire budget. So I don't think there's a necessity to deal with declares of interest in that. But you get legal advice. But normally the advice is, if it's individuals, if we were dealing with social services or education, then I can see the necessary to have declarations of declarations of interest. Any officers? No? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the one that's generally on for scrutiny, and that's the prohibition of whip votes and declarations of party whips. Item 4 on the agenda are minutes of the previous meeting held on the 9th of December. I'm sure everybody's diligently read them. And are there any issues on those agendas, on those minutes? No? Okay then, right. Item 5 on the agenda is public questions. We haven't received any. Okay, right, then we go on to item 6, which is the budget proposals for 26-27 and the ongoing programme from 2029 until 2030. Councillor Stewart, leader, would you like to say a few words prior to Mr. Smith coming in?
Chair, if it's okay with you, I think probably best we have a technical run through from Mr. Smith, and then I'll add some political comment afterwards.
Okay, that's fine. Then, Mr. Smith, would you like to give us a quick run through the budget?
Yes, of course, Chair, and thank you, Leader. Report in normal format at this time of year, and as you said in your opening preamble, Chair, this is the first opportunity to see the whole broad package. Recommendations are in normal format, 4 of them. It includes my certification as to why I released it under urgency. There will still be full opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny to the normal timelines through February and March. Although we had an earlier settlement in one sense, it was complicated by the double hop, because there was then, in the middle of December, a revised set of assumptions as a result of a proposed Labour-Plaid deal in the Senedd, and I have taken the opportunity to rework all of the proposals through over the Christmas period, because you know what a Grinch I am, to enable budget proposals in front of you. I will be very brief and mostly refer to only 3 core elements of it in terms of my technical advice. Section 11 highlights that double hop. We got a better than the average settlement. We then got a better still again in terms of the revised proposals. Whilst there is some joy in that, and obviously extra money is gratefully appreciated in being received, the biggest single component driving the overall settlement for Swansea, as it was for Newport, because we are the 2 highest proposed increases from Welsh Government, is simply because our population is growing faster than anyone else's, and with that population growth comes other spend pressures in any case. So paragraph 11 is key in terms of setting out the assumptions. And in fact, the overall budget proposals in MTFP, bar the materially increased settlement, because we had set an MTFP last year as a council with an assumption of 2% average, and that's still my position going forward, but clearly we haven't got 1 or 2% this year. It's now up to 5.2%, which is incredibly useful. But bar that and the pensions item I'm going to refer to, pretty much the rest of the MTFP remains incredibly stable. But those 2 fundamental changes are bigger money bucks, and it's right that I draw attention to them. I will probably draw your attention then to the end of paragraph 14. It's a little bit clunky, but because I am confident that there will be new capital proposals coming through to Cabinet, and potentially to council. So some of them may be in the budget proposals come March, but some of them may come through as your beloved FPR7 reports to Cabinet. I know, Chair, you've repeated a number of occasions in terms of how there is visibility on that, but also risks around equal pay. I have made an assumption and parked £5 million at the moment in contingency. This is not just spare money in contingency, it's parked there until it's determined what exactly it's going to be spent on, but it anticipates a number of items coming through that will be spent, and therefore I've put it there for now, but that is likely to shape and evolve through February and March as things come through in terms of budget changes, but also if Cabinet receives any FPR7 reports during the rest of January, February or March. The main emphasis for me is to draw your attention to table 1 in terms of my technical advice. Budget and MTFP last year made an assumption of 2.5% for pay and inflation, and that remains remarkably prescient. At UK level, the UK government is providing for an assumed 6.5% pay award for teachers over the next 3 years. Welsh government has gone on the record saying they've assumed 2.2% for the next year, so my assumption holds at 2.5% throughout. We have made arrangements to do the top up for the extra pay that was made available for teachers and for local government staff. It was a 4% and 3.2% pay award rather than the 2.5%. In normal fashion, I make a meaty contribution to make sure that we fund particularly social services for contractors in terms of national and real living wage contracts. We have also taken the opportunity to top up some of the shortfalls in national insurance. Whilst we guessed 7 million and broadly got 7 million, there are still spillover effects. It only partly recompensed the council. So I've taken the opportunity to build in some additional funding, both for core services, but also for schools to recompense them. The biggest single item is the one referenced as note 2. I am your pension section 151 officer, and I base my decisions solely in the interests of the fund, but on actuarial advice. And the actuarial advice this year, subject to it being confirmed in March, but I'm more in control of this than most things that could still happen between now and March, is that I can reduce the employer's pension contribution by a further third, which takes 16 to 17 million pounds base off spending pressures and creates massive amounts of headroom, which at the moment are proposed to be spent back in services, both core services and schools. The notes on capital charges are always a bit clunky and a bit confusing, but I've got to remind you the budget set last year deliberately deferred £3 million worth of existing capital financing, and I'm gradually setting that back in over the next 4 years, which is why it's phased in as 1 rising to 2, rising to £3 million, and then stabilising. The proposals in this budget round are the same as previous ones. You've had my advice consistently for about 4 or 5 years now. Defer, defer, defer. Try to avoid PWLB borrowing rates, which are still today above 6% at 30-year money. So that is to finance the existing already agreed capital programme, but deferred for as long as possible. The notes in terms of 5, I remind you that last year Council agreed to 2 years worth of £2.5 million worth use of capital equalisation reserve to help keep council tax and revenue budgets down. I remind that was not my advice, and I modified my section 25 assurance statement accordingly. My preference is the capital equalisation reserve is used directly to keep down capital financing costs. Council made a different decision, reasonable and proportionate, and I understand entirely why. It was around striking a balance between what the Treasurer thinks is right technically versus what is reasonable and affordable for both service users and local taxpayers. The other one about removing use of other reserves is again around local choices, where £6 million was committed over 2 years, 2 lots of £3 million a year drawn from the insurance reserve to fund 2 additional years worth of £3 million worth of capital financing on particularly highways. So they all need to be reinstated and reversed appropriately. I mentioned that contingency's got a large sum in it, but it includes 5 million, which I consider to be pre-committed for other items. It's just where it lands in due course, which is one marked as note 8. There will, of course, be the usual adjustments needed in terms of the fire authority. It's not yet finalised, the other levying bodies, etc. And at the moment, the table sets out a whole raft of proposals and assumptions about future settlements around 2% in note 11, the significantly enhanced position for the current year, and at the moment council tax is a headline gross figure, which is both the tax base growth, the collection yield and assumed collection rate growth, and what may ultimately be a council tax increase, but at the moment it becomes a balancing item. That decision and discussion is to be informed as a result of consultation and will be more explicitly set out in February and ultimately to March Council. So there's a lot going on in that table, but it's important I gave you some technical advice on that. After that long, laborious talk through about that, I'm going to speed up quite a bit. Section 48 sets out the proposals in terms of schools, because they are in a unique position in terms of their delegated budgets. And at the moment, over £12 million worth of additional cash goes into schools. And as the table sets out quite clearly, significantly enhanced as a result of that budget deal. It's an additional £3 million afforded compared to what was going to be afforded before that Senedd deal was proposed. And my view is that this is going to remain a very generous offer. I anticipate that both in cash terms and percentage terms, my intelligence based on what's going on in the other 21 authorities is we will be top quartile on both. And I remind, as I did to Cabinet, we are in a privileged position. Other authorities may put larger or similar size sums in, but they are facing negative schools reserves before they've even started. We have the highest schools reserves in Wales, and I'm confident that if we're top quartile for both the total and the percentage, that must maintain our position in terms of a relatively privileged position compared to others. Section 52, the table summarises and sets out that clearly at the moment you have a set of proposals that would result in a balanced budget, which is required by law. The main ask of me to be certifying in due course and giving you advice. And then I just draw your attention to the risks, and two risks in particular. I have highlighted a bit further this year risks around equal pay claims, simply because of what I see happening on a national level and pronouncements by some of the trade unions. So I draw your attention to that one. And the other one I need to draw attention to is specific grants for a number of reasons. As many of you in this panel know, and others have talked about before, we focus on the core budget setting. We know now the block grant settlements pretty much, but we don't know specific grants. When the original proposals were set out, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance indicated that it would be a rollover budget with plus 2%, or frankly, plus 2% doesn't touch the sides of most of our inflationary pressure. So that's the first problem. The second is that the initial settlement at a national level for Wales clearly sets out 2%, but it's all in local authority education grant and in housing support grant, both very valuable, very important, very prioritised. But what about social care and all the other ones? So I am hopeful there may be some work still to be done there in terms of further announcements from ministers as to what may be available on specific grants. And there is a further complication on specific grants in the sense that we await the unwinding of UK Shared Prosperity Fund and its replacement with the Local Growth Fund. And also the leader's commitment and in conjunction with myself around what levels of contingency spend we might allocate to top up locally on top that. There has been a commitment made that we will update Cabinet when we know stuff. At the moment, we have a degree of a letter of comfort from Welsh Government, but we still wait for terms and conditions. It's also subject to final amounts, etc., etc. And the risk there still remains both the quantum, the fact that it may be more heavily capital than revenue, and some of the things we currently spend on that were eligible for UK Shared Prosperity Fund may not be eligible under the National Local Growth Fund, which is why we may take the opportunity to do some local choice stuff. But all of those warnings and caveats are very much about, can we have triple chocolate frosting on the double chocolate cake, and can we have some sprinkles and hundreds of thousands on top of what is a multi-100 million pound budget and gross £1 billion budget. So that concludes my technical advice, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Leader?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Smith has covered all of the technical ones very nicely, as always, and my thanks to him and his team for the work that they've done on this. As Mr. Smith alluded to, significant headroom being created this year as a result of the changes in the pensions contributions. And again, grateful to Mr. Smith for his reevaluation of that. Swansea, like all authorities across Wales, will benefit to different degrees in terms of the ability to reduce the contributions into the funds. And obviously, as Mr. Smith alluded to, Swansea's funds remains the top performing in the UK, which is why we're able to take a sizable discount in terms of the amount that's going in. And again, it's a base amount, so it's one that will repeat for the next few years. So again, that is greatly helpful in terms of being able to deal with some of the pressures that we are seeing. The other thing, obviously, there has been an improved settlement from Welsh Government, and obviously significant improvement in terms of the settlement for Wales from the UK government. Those things do matter. They give the ability for money to flow to councils, and the 5.2% settlement that we have obviously has helped again with us dealing with those pressures. That then means that we are able to provide the proposals to see record investment in both education, social care and other services. So focusing on those three key priorities of education, care and community. So that's what the document lays out. Just in terms of the savings, again, very few posts affected as a result of the savings proposals that are included in the document. And again, as Mr. Smith alluded to, no new requirements in there. These are ones which will have appeared in previous MTFP and obviously have flowed through. So therefore, they are existing ones that you will have looked at previously. So with that, Chair, again, a very, very positive position from us to work from. And again, obviously, Cabinet and Council will come forward with appropriate proposals on council tax in due course. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Leader. Can I have requests now for questions? Councillor Jeff Jones.
Apologies, Chair. It's not, well, not a question at this stage anyway. Apologies for being late. I had a problem actually getting in, and I got to give Councillor Mary Jones, who's not attending today, so she sends her apologies. So I'll pass on to Councillor Will Thomas, I think, is the next questioner.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, well.
Thanks, Chair. And yes, great news about the pension fund and how pension funds performing and the effects that has on our budget. So really, really good news there. It's just a very brief question, really, on page 5 in the table with the contingency. I suppose it's a question for Ben. I'm just wondering how that's calculated, because it looks the figures look very random from what I'm looking at. So it goes from this year's budget contingency 8 million, and then it sort of goes to 6.4, 5.7, 6.5 in future years. I'm just wondering how that's calculated, please. Thanks.
So it's random simply because it also is a balancing factor of any other things that are flowing through. So as stepped increases in future capital financing costs come in, I have to lop it off contingency because I'm working within an overall envelope that hasn't changed. So the 5 million basal load is there for all the years. The bit I've referenced as especially parked this year, but there will always be some toing and froing. The same is true in previous years where it won't look particularly obvious or logical. The principle is, in one sense, you'd like contingency to be higher in future years because you get further out to uncertainty. But the reality is it's also a timing mechanism around items as they land in terms of what can be afforded. And remember, this is the adjustment to contingency. The council holds a budgeted base contingency level, which is a budgeted contribution to reserves, and then adds to or from that. The contingency level base is 3-odd million. We'll touch upon that in the budget monitoring report. But you also had £18 million carried forward from 24-25, where I took a very passive view on my review of reserves, given some of the risks, some of the desire to keep using capital equalisation reserve and contingency to defer those pesky borrowing costs. Because whilst you're aware, Councillor Thomas, base rates have come down, longer term yields have just been really, really stubborn. So I've left all of them deliberately large and passive because there are some risks swirling around. And as I referenced, there will also be the need to consider the local growth fund once we know what the local growth fund at a national level is, which replaces UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because some of that will be drawn from contingency, as is referenced in the second quarter and will again be referenced in the third quarter. So that's the reason for the method in the madness in terms of, and also why it's a very, very specific figure, almost the nearest £1,000. It's one of those, along with a number of other items, that also balances out a few bits at the margin. But you can see broadly the 5 million is there. There's a bit extra and it dwindles down a little bit over time. I'd prefer it to be the other way because there's more uncertainties, but it's within the boundaries of normal levels of contingency assumptions for what is a planning assumption when we only know 1 year's potential settlement. Yet again, we will have 3 years in the future with at the moment no certainty over what we're going to get in terms of settlement, which is the single biggest component determinant of what the council can consider as affordable. So I hope that clarifies the position, Councillor Thomas.
All right, Will, did you understand all that? Yeah, I bet you did. Okay, Paxton, Councillor Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. Not sure if I got my figures right on this, but you'll put me right if I'm wrong, obviously. You're looking at council tax increases of about 9.5 million next year. I think if my figures are right, that represents about a 5.8% increase. I'm just wondering why it's in view of the fairly favourable financial situation, the council tax rise might be so high.
So I'll
Can
go
I
with some
suggest,
So I'll go with some
Paxton?
sorry, Chair, I'm happy to give some technical advice first. Obviously, I won't answer the politics. In terms of the specifics, I'll defer to the leader. But the first thing I emphasise is that is the total figure for the tax yield at the moment for it to balance. I'm not disputing anyone can get the calculator out and work out an implied amount, but I would remind the council set in December a tax base which assumed a material increase in the tax base because of physical houses built and a further increase in the assumed collection rate. So there are several percentage points worth of growth in the base even before we get to a headline council tax increase. I will defer to the leader in a moment on the politics end of it, but for the avoidance of doubt, at a technical build level, if we've got a settlement which is worth 5% odd, which is great, but if we've got pay awards, including catch-up pay awards from last year of 4%, if we've got social care inflationary pressures of, do you want 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, the Welsh Government's own assumptions on council tax setting and budget setting, whilst we're not obliged to follow them, make an assumption because they put an amount into RSG on the basis of what you need to spend to stand still, and there is an assumption over council tax at standard spending. The Welsh Government's own assumptions require that to be over 9% in headline increase. So inflation hasn't gone away. Service-specific inflation in some particularly meaty, knotty areas, additional learning needs, all of social services, which I know will be particularly dear to your heart yourself when it comes to looking at it from the social services scrutiny panel. So those pressures have not gone away. So they will force part of the issue. And of course, I know you all know this, but again, 75% of all the funding comes from revenue support grants. So if bits of that, whilst generous, end up less than headline inflation on the services we incur, not the headline inflation for an average basket of goods, which includes food and everything else, then it gets magnified fourfold on council tax. I think I'll probably stop at that in terms of my technical advice, or defer to the leader on any politics that may need to be added on to that in terms of the riposte. Thank you, Chair.
Leader.
Can I just say, first of all, Chairman, I was just going to say, obviously my simple maths is far too simple for working out these proper calculations, so I'm always grateful to Ben for his explanations. Thank you.
Okay, leader.
Yeah, Chair, I won't add much politics into this one. I think the point's been well made, which is you can arrive at any figure you like, but it's going to be the wrong figure because there are so many other variables in it. So go into that space at your peril. What I can say is obviously we'll continue to balance the needs to invest in services against the needs and the pressures on families across Swansea, and we will make the appropriate decision at the appropriate time. Just to point out, we obviously have been lower than those projected amounts in every year, because I think if you look back at previous years, you'd have been looking at Welsh Government identified gaps of sometimes double digits, and we've obviously been far less than that when we set the final council tax. The other point I think to make on this is, of course, the decisions we make have to be ones as well whereby you look to future years, because when you set council tax, it has a multiplying effect that repeats every year. So that's why we get into debates often at council when others try to move money reducing council tax or changing bits in it, because if you make base changes, they have cumulative effects over a number of years, and therefore they're not simple changes. So all of that's in the mix when we make the decision about council tax. Yeah, the figure you've come up with, Councillor Paxton Williams, won't be the figure, I can guarantee you that. But we will obviously come to that decision when we get to council in March.
Thank you very much.
Paxton, Paxton have been told it's not going to be 5%. Now then, Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask you about the actuarial advice, if that's okay. Not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, because clearly it's very useful. Can you just tell me what period of time does that actuarial advice apply to? In other words, when's going to be the next assessment of the pension fund? And is the money which we're receiving today, this year, a one-off, or is that going to be over a period of time where we'll be getting money in future years as well? And then the third question is, obviously, we manage this pension fund on behalf of other bodies as well. So will those other bodies also be getting some surplus repaid back to them?
Ben, do you want to answer these questions?
Yes, of course. As there's three of them, I'm just jotting myself a note because, you know, I remind that I make decisions only in the interests of the fund, both active members and pensioners, and I'm both. And the reality is, if there's a benefit to employers, that's a side bonus, but is not the main decision. The actuarial revaluation happens once every 3 years. The current valuation is being done in 25-26, so it will fix the rates for 26-27. 27-28, 28-29. 29-30 is the next time rates may change. You'll note that's the final year of this year's MTFP. I make no assumptions of it going higher or lower. That seems reasonable to me because I took very prudent steps in my dialogue with the actuaries as to what was reasonable to take this time. So so it will affect 29-30 next time. The 16 odd million for core plus the million parked in schools table, which is why we get to 17 million odd overall, is fixed for 3 years. If the valuation certificate still holds in March, there's no reason it wouldn't. So I think that answers that one in terms of how long it holds for. I've covered the years it covers. I would make the point that the contribution rate would go from 21.3 to 14.2, less than half of the rate that is charged for teachers' pensions, which we have no control over. Local government pension fund is a funded, in our case, more than 100% funded, with a buffer on top and sprinkles on top. Very prudent, totally taking the actuarial advice, as opposed to the unfunded scheme for teachers, which materially affects us. And the last time there was a revaluation there, it went completely the opposite way. And the same happens with fire and police, who are unfunded schemes. And I anticipate the same could happen again, because that's funded based on growth in the UK economy, and that is at the moment a little bit challenging. You mentioned, does it impact others? Yes, it does. I run the pension fund in total for 40 odd plus bodies. Some of those are scheduled, some of them are admitted, and some of them are big and some of them are small. To break it down to simple levels, the two biggest employers, which are us and Neathport Talbot, they are large employers and they have separate valuation certificates for their own funds, and so both of us materially gain. And you may have seen equally Neathport Talbot's council proposals are out with an equally proportionate material saving in their budget savings proposals, but courtesy of your friendly local neighbourhood section 151 officer, who happens to be me. I am sure members and officers in Neathport Talbot are as grateful as you are here. The other bodies tend to have individual valuations, but they're not so directly affected because they're small bodies, but it affects a whole number of scheduled and omitted bodies. It includes community councils, it includes the Port Health Authority, albeit they have no active members. It includes residual obligations for those at Gower College, Neathport Talbot College, and a whole raft of other employers. But so the two that get the biggest gain, because they get separate specific valuations, are us and Neathport Talbot. And I can see they've baked theirs in too. But the principle will apply to all 22 authorities. There are 8 pension funds. All 8 are making a reduction as a result of good gains. And they will also be in the same position. They work the pension fund on behalf of constituent authorities and a raft of smaller bodies. So I think that covers that one as well. But I will come back if there's anything else, if I've missed anything, Councillor Black.
No, that's fine. So effectively, the 17 million we're gaining next year is baseline for the year and the year after and the year after that, and we can
Correct.
therefore use that money. Yeah, okay. Just one other question in terms of social services. Obviously, this year we had a grant towards social care as a sort of one-off. Have you had any indication whether that's going to be a grant again next year, or is that going to be included in the RSG? Have you heard anything about that at all?
No. The transfers into revenue support grant have been set, and they were all the things we expected in terms of NI, teachers' pay catch-up, general pay catch-up, but there is no indication of anything further being transferred into RSG at this moment. There is no indication of anything being announced as to what may continue in terms of one-off support. Obviously, very complicated by there is a limit to what the current Welsh Government can do in terms of committing. Given we know how it works, there are elections, and the reality is when there are elections, there will be a new administration of one shape or form. It could even look like the old one. It could be a different one. I'm not allowed to say any more than that. But the reality is new government of whatever shape or hue, including if it's the colour of the current government, there is almost invariably always a new budget update and announcement. And at the moment, there is no indication of any news whatsoever. And it's the biggest risk I carry, and all of you panel members always flag up. We don't know specific grants at this point in time at a national level, beyond the increases for LEG and HSG. There is no indication of any other money. It was the most disappointing aspect of the core settlement at the moment, that all of the listed national grants for social services were all entirely flat. Now, that doesn't mean they're the final figures, but if they were all entirely flat, that doesn't even give the 2%, which wouldn't even touch the sides for inflation.
My understanding is that the intention is that money was to carry over and be put into the base. But the last time I had a discussion with Mark Drayford, he was talking about it being a grant for another year before it was put into the RSG. So I would hope that we get that money again next year.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, absolutely agree. I think the WLJ position is that those grants are then rolled into RSG so that they become base and they become recurring. But obviously the RSG itself is a grant, even though we treat it as if it's a guaranteed recurring sum. But yeah, just to confirm what Councillor Black said, I think that is always the intention. That's certainly been the lobbying position of the WLGA. But as Mr. Smith quite rightly said, it's up to the next government, at whatever that government looks like, to make that determination.
Okay. Any other members with questions? No? Okay. Leader, you've got your hand up? Oh, no, it's come down. Right. Okay, Ben, I got a number of questions and comments. Right. On the first table one, I congratulate you on the items 4, 4 and 5. Because the way it's written, to remove the extra capital spend funding, it cancels itself out, does it not? So it's the use of capital equalisation reserve is going to be 2.5 million in 27-28. Is that correct?
The whole premise of all of those entries is indeed for me to move the cups around to make sure that any decisions that are done one-off are entirely neutralised over the period of the MTFP for the reasons stated previously. So they look complicated, but they are entirely designed, as you say, to neutralise the impact, to make sure that any one-off windfall gains for a year do not imperil the longer-term plans of the council, because the deferred borrowing still has to happen. It's been my consistent advice for years, Chair.
I know. Now then, on the just to clarify, the reduction in employees' pension costs, it's a recurring reduction of 16 million per year, or for the 3 years, the actuarial reduction is going to a total of, what, 48 million, or is it just 16 million, which carries on throughout each year?
So as described, it is both. There's the 16 million in the table plus the million recycled in schools, which is why sometimes I refer to it being worth 17 million as a whole. That's 17 million in the base for 3 years. It definitively frees up over the life of the MTFP 3 lots of the full 17 million, which is 51 million. But if I exclude schools, then it's the 3 lots of 16, which is again 48 million, as you've set out. It is both cash releasing for the 3 years, but it is also base for the 3 years.
Okay. On the item 7 on that is the new service provisions accepted. I'm assuming that those are the ones which have actually that are in the budget currently. And we're saying that that's that figure of 26.9 and next year 29.3. That is what the requirement is for the revenue budget.
Correct. You get more detail in February and March to Cabinet and Council for speed of getting the proposals around, but it is the distilled discussions and decisions informally with Cabinet members and CMT colleagues, and is what it needs to be. both in terms of the assumptions in the previous MTFP, but also spends that headroom that is created as a result of the as a result of the pension savings and the additional revenue support grant. But it is where materially the money is ploughed into schools and social services, but it is reflective of all of the agreed pressures having gone through a technical assessment process through September all the way through to December. There will be further granularity in the follow-up reports, as is normally the case, and in the ultimate budget set for each programme area and each head of service and each directorate. It is simply that early on the focus is often always on the overall position and the savings, but rest assured there is way more going in than coming out, which has been the consistent message for years. I hope that clarifies it, Chair.
Yeah. In the narrative, I noticed you said there's a significant increase in costs are expected around about the capital recharges will be around 2029, 2030. Is this roughly where we will see the increase in the capital charges being significant?
Yes, my advice has always been that we've banked the benefit of borrowing hundreds of millions at 1%. We have commitments that require me to finance more. As I mentioned earlier in responding to Councillor Thomas's questions, I look at PWLB on a daily basis, and 30-year money from PWLB is still over 6%. So I just keep turning my nose up and thumbing. But I am heavily relying on using the capital equalisation reserve, contingency, cash flow and everything else under the sun that I can think about to avoid what is inevitably coming in terms of financing a larger capital programme. I am hoping that rates will come down, but I am not anticipating they're going to come down to the cheapest chips rates we had before. And my assumption has always been to try and get to 29.30 in terms of stretching the capital equalisation reserve, banking any underspend savings, which is why I mentioned it at council. I was again a little bit sniffy in terms of my update advice to yourselves. I reminded the whole of council. My advice is always, as an officer, to spend money on the capital equalisation reserve to directly reduce the cost of capital financing, not to use it for revenue. But hey, you're in charge, not me, and it's within reasonable boundaries. But it's still my expectation that we will see them come through. I will defer it for as long as is humanly possible, simply to reduce the cost on all taxpayers. It's not a device to kick the can down the road. It is a device designed to make sure we minimise absolutely the cost of borrowing of things that we've already committed to.
I think it's important to note as well that the total cost of the Mumbles Sea Defence Scheme has been given to the council through the grant, and that's approximately 25 million. I think it's important that we actually say that. I think it's because the work was done, and thankfully we really didn't have to pay. It's been paid for by central government. Going on to the savings, I think there's something.
Chair, could I just technically just advise you? You're right in one sense in terms of the broad principle, but again, I'm a bit of a pedant. So the £28 million scheme is 3 million us, 25 million nominally funded by Welsh Government. I say nominally because we carry all of the spend risks and all of the capital financing risks. What we got was additional revenue support grant, and we're already banking the revenue support grant, but I haven't yet had to fully externalise and borrow it. So you're right in broad principle, of course, but the risks all stand with us. It's not as plain vanilla as other schemes. So it includes dribs and drabs of money, which I'm very grateful for 25 years in the revenue support grant. But I guarantee you, given we've had 3 years of it now, in 22 years' time, when the revenue support grant for that component goes down to zero, it'll be because of that one. It's just the unique way that the CRMP is financed, and the Welsh Government has repeated the trick with the local government borrowing initiative for highways. There are some temporary top-ups. Very grateful they've gone into RSG, so you're right to say the money is predominantly funded, but those technical nuances do come with some risks. So I felt I just had to layer that on in the interests of full transparency.
And I think I think most of us understand that anyway, that the Welsh Government can turn around and say, alter that as to suit themselves, really, whatever finance they have had. I think, finally, going on to Appendix B, I just want to clear something up, because it is really important that we, especially at this particular time when we are doing quite a lot of, if on Appendix B, in the saving schedules, I think it's important we go, if we look at one in particular now, Right. In the Place Directive, increase in street works, increased charges, income from park enforcement cameras, annual review, updated pricing tariff, increase in fees, etc. It says on the right-hand side, savings. Now, are they savings, or is that an increase in how much money we get that offsets the savings? So in effect, I'll give an example. On review of income from parking enforcement cameras, it says a savings of £50,000. That doesn't mean that we're going to have less parking enforcement cameras and cars. It means that the fee will be up by 50,000. Is that correct or not?
So if I go first in terms of technical advice, and then I'll defer to the leader, even though he's indicated first. Yes, don't forget, this is all framed in terms of what the core budget is for the council. And
Yes.
The core budget is net of all fees and charges. So if fees and charges go up for services, it is a saving for the core budget. I'll defer to the leader on the other items, but I consider any income rises on services to be savings to the core budget. I see them as one and the same thing. The users of the services may not, but I'll defer to the leader on any further comment.
I understand that, and that's why I think it's important that we clarify it. Leader?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's a fair observation. Again, some of these things will be additional incomes, and obviously every year we have to review that along with the directors and service leads on the basis that inflation erodes the value of the fees and charges that we levy. Obviously, just a reminder, obviously, for things like parking, etc., we don't and aren't allowed to make a profit. The service as a whole has to wipe its face, and that's what we're doing. And again, you'll recall that we've taken decisions to increase the number of vehicles, for instance, that are able to patrol and to identify unlawful parking, etc., in very areas. So again, those investments are invest to save, essentially, and they are ones that allow us to identify and patrol larger areas to make sure that we enforce parking appropriately.
I completely understand that, leader, but I just want to make absolutely sure that the public and members understand that the increase in the fees, it's not actually, as the Section 151 officer Bennett said, it's an increase in the core budget of that particular section. There is one which I think we spoke about before, leader, and that's the increase for burials and cremations, an increase of £217,000. That one I would at some stage like to discuss with you, because it does seem to be an extremely large increase, considering that some of the things that we've done in the past. If it was the mercury abatement that we had in the we had to do at the crematorium, that's well understandable, because that was a really expensive alteration to the apparatus that's in there. But I think this one is one that I would ask you to look at again with it when you look at it as a cabinet. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Just on that one, just to refer back to, I think, our previous debate on this one, just to reassure you, what we've done is to look at the marketplace for burials, if you put that term on it. Probably not the best term to use, but essentially, obviously, people have the opportunity to, seek a cremation or burial anywhere they wish. They don't have to be buried in their or cremated in their nearest location, and therefore it is a competitive service in that respect, and that's what the advice is in terms of the increase there for that. And of course, just a reminder in terms of that split out cost for the cremation element or the burial element, that is a small cost in the overall cost of the funeral itself. So again, what we've tried to do is to balance that in terms of making sure that the service we offer is competitively priced with others that offer the similar service in the region.
I understand that, and I know that there are privately operated crematoria in the area, and I understand that. But I think we are talking about Swansea, and at the end of the day, it is one of the few things that, as a council, it is a traumatic time for people, and I just want to clarify that position. I Obviously there are other issues within this, but I think it's better if I actually write to you with regards to one or two of these issues. The one thing I am delighted to see in there is the income stream for the development of a caravan and motorhome parking. I think we talked about this many years ago, and we waited till some of the work had been done in some of our car parks near the near the beach and near the sea, because I think there's a massive potential for that to be increased. As for the rest of the questions, as I say, I think I'll write to you about them, because some of them are within social services and potentially within education specifically. And I think it's better if we ask the different heads of those departments for queries on those particular savings. If that's the case, if there's nobody else got any questions? No, can I thank you, Ben, and can I thank you, Leader, for your work on this particular budget proposal. I noticed that you can stay for the next item on the agenda if you want to, and that is if that's everybody's happy with that item, so we'll move on. And the next item is item 7, Q2 revenue and capital budget monitoring.
So if I may go again first, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, go on then, Ben.
So I shall only draw attention to the important bits in terms of technical advice. The first one is paragraph 9, which sets out the directorate overall position, a mere £1.3 million overspend. That is an improvement from the first quarter. I anticipate it improving come the third quarter, and that remains remarkable given that the extra pay awards and NI and everything are held in central inflation. I was a meanie for 25-26. I've allocated it out in the proposal we've just discussed for 26-27, but that means that come what's held in the central amounts means it would otherwise be an underspend. And given the pressures, especially in homelessness and in social care, that is not the story being reported in many other councils at such a small figure overall. And as I say, I anticipate that to improve further. I would, having been positive there, draw your attention to section 15. I've added a bold bit in reminding that no one is allowed to overspend and the budgets must be balanced at all times. That is both HRA and general fund, and I'll draw your attention to the HRA again in a moment, because that does vex me more than the general fund at the moment. Paragraph 19 sets out the table with the contingency fund, and I've already touched upon some of these in answering previous questions. The base contribution to contingency is around £3 million. We were in the privileged position of having a mere £18 million to carry forward from 24-25 for the reasons set out in the outturn report. And then I have, as I reported at first quarter to both Cabinet and to yourselves, chucked the kitchen sink at it in terms of everything under the sun. It includes provisionally up to that £10 million being set aside for the local growth fund once we know what's happening with the national stuff. But I have set out everything and anything I can think of in terms of normal risks and contingencies, some which will come to pass, some which may not come to pass fully. And as I say, even as a result of thinking of everything in my typical risk-averse treasurer doom-monger way, there is still a balance unspent on that as well at this point in time. In similar vein, if I draw your attention to paragraph 31 in the table on centrally held inflation provision, there is still £3.6 million not allocated. If you cross-refer back to the previous item, you'll see I am drawing down on that in terms of my advice for decisions on next year's budget. We did swell that provision many years ago and have been gradually reducing it down as we funded energy inflation and put more money into schools, etc. So the paragraph 36 pulls it all together in a little summary table. Services, yes, technically overspent, but only because I'm a meanie and held stuff centrally. I've still got money on contingency. I've got money on central inflation. We've gained a bit on the national insurance compensation because of the weirdness of having to be compensated for the fire authority because they don't receive the money direct. And that means we have a net underspend already at second quarter. Paragraph 38 reminds that due to the technical trickery on capital financing and treasury management, I anticipate at least a £6.5 million underspend on capital financing. which will be my advice again, that it flows into capital equalisation reserve, trying for consistency to stretch us all the way through to 29-30 in terms of preserving the capital equalisation reserve and avoiding the need to borrow at what are currently 6% rates from the PWLB. Capital spend is set out in paragraph 43, and I say exactly the same that I say all the time here and to Cabinet. I think that spend level is challenging for some to see. It's so low, but as your meanie treasurer, I absolutely love low capital spend because it means I've got more cash in the bank, which means I'm earning interest on it, which drives that previous item in terms of capital financing underspending. But I'll say no more on that. There may be some questions on that. I do need you to focus on the housing revenue account, as I did give advice to Cabinet the same. So paragraphs 48 through to 53, there is a material overspend on the housing revenue account, and whilst action is being taken, it is still very large, and I am reminding members and officers that the rules around a balanced budget apply equally to the HRA as the general fund. So I make my advice. You may wish to ask some further questions on that. And then pulling it all together, because there's a lot going on, Appendix A puts it all on a single page, which is the slight service overspend of 1.3 million, offset by the amounts held in contingency and central inflation. The £6.5 million assumed going to make temporarily on capital financing, and then that all flows through in terms of yet again a materially reduced planned draw from earmarked reserves. For many years we have set a budget on the basis we're going to need to take a heavy draw from reserves, and then we work on the basis that if there are underspends, if contingency is underspent and rolled forward, if capital financing slips and underspends, that we can make a material reduction there, and that is clearly set out in the table. The rest of the report sets out directors' comments for the individual directorates, and again, if there are questions on those, I would ask that you follow those up in writing with the relevant officers. But that concludes my technical advice, Chair.
Leader?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, not much to add to what Mr. Smith has said. Again, my thanks go to Mr. Smith and his team, but to also to all of CMT and Cabinet for the work that Cabinet members and directors and heads of service are doing to ensure that we stay within the set budget. So that that is really good position to be in at second quarter. And again, it wasn't so long ago that it was quite usual to see an overspend, sorry, of 8 to 10 million at this point in the year. Obviously, those that follow these things quite closely will know that often the second quarter is the most negative quarter of the year, and that things improve then in third and fourth quarters. So I agree with Mr. Smith. This is quite a remarkable position for us to be in at this point in the year, and we do, both of us, expect things to continue to improve as we get to outturn. So with that, you know, very, very happy with the current position. Some challenges on the horizon as always, but again, I think departments are doing really well in terms of staying within their budgets while still delivering the things that we're asking them to do.
Thank you, Leader. Any questions from members? Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, just a question on the housing revenue account. In accordance with the Director of Finance's advice, we have, of course, kept a significant amount of money back in reserves because of ongoing legal issues. I'm just wondering, have we got to the stage yet where those issues have been resolved and that money can be released back into the HRA? And if not, when?
So, simple answer, yes, the legal risk has gone away. So my intervention, which was discussed in terms of budget setting last year, has gone away, and that can be released back. Reserves are, of course, only available to be spent once. So the restriction was predominantly on capital. The issue I'm raising here is the ongoing revenue spend on top. But the simple answer is a straight yes. The risk has gone away for all public bodies in Wales, and that has already been relaxed by me in terms of technical officer advice, and spending officers are working on that basis.
So has there yet been a change, an alteration to the capital budgets to reflect that, or is that still to come?
Still to be worked through and coming through, and given that I didn't relax it until we got to effectively November, December, it's so close to working up the new budget proposals, and the new budget proposals for the HRA capital, which are predominantly funded by revenue contributions from the HRA, will be impacted as a result of my stern advice to make sure that the HRA revenue budget does not continue to overspend at the level it is overspending. So effectively it's still being worked through, and it will be reflected in the budgets coming through in February to Cabinet and Council in March, which releases the one-off money, but it has to be read in conjunction with this ongoing problem of the degree of revenue overspending. If revenue overspending persists, it must be rebalanced, and then revenue contributions to capital on the H rate must themselves be reduced in future years.
Okay, thanks.
Leader, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just to add to what Mr. Smith said, obviously Mr. Smith is absolutely correct from the budgeting point of view, but just to confirm to Councillor Black, myself, Councillor Lewis and others have had detailed discussions with housing officers. Housing investment is a pipeline. And again, as Mr. Smith quite rightly pointed out, we had throttled back a bit whilst that legal threat was there. But the pipeline is still there. The work, knowing that we were approaching the point where we felt we were getting more confident that there would be a positive outcome to that legal position, we have started to remobilise the work within housing to get that money now released, as Mr. Smith has said, but that will take some time just to gear up and ramp up again. But that has to be balanced, as Mr. Smith said, in terms of dealing with any overspends that we're incurring at the same time. But just to reassure Councillor Black, yes, the plan remains to reinstate the previous programme and therefore to progress it as quickly as possible.
Could I just then be more specific? Because as the leader will know from my contribution at the last budget meeting in February last year, my concern is about the £600,000 that was taken out of environmental improvements. So I'm just hoping that that money can be reinstated in this financial year, so some of the schemes which were planned for it can go ahead. Just to put that plea in. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, just to say, I think, look, we all share Councillor Black's will to see those things reinstated. I think the reality was, though, we had to take decisions that none of us wanted to take in order to try and prepare for the worst outcome if the legal threat came to pass. But now that's passed, we can start to reinstate all of those things.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could probably ask, in regards to the departments keeping on track with the budgets, and obviously ahead the services there, what monitoring processes have we got in place, Mr. Smith or Leader? Can you inform us of that?
So all directorates have a monthly performance and financial management meeting. I have one of my senior officers in attendance each of those monthly. They are fed through to me in mission control on all things money, which gives me assurance or otherwise for anything in due course. And then those are summarised and reported quarterly formally to Cabinet. But you don't just get, although you only get it in public consumption every 3 months, which is pretty much the same with other authorities, we try to push it as late as possible. Some authorities maybe only just reporting on their second quarter. We're about, you're only getting second quarter today, but we're imminently going to be reporting on third quarter to Cabinet. So there is a monthly process, well understood, well documented, that has worked for donkey's years. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I do rely on my own intelligence and keeping ear close to the ground, and you see the results manifest in the distilled public quarterly positions. Frankly, given the spend pressures on homelessness, additional learning needs, social care, to be in a position where I'm rocking up saying at the moment we're £1 million over in total, with £3 million I never even funded people in the first place because I was a meanie, is incredible. And the bit I forgot to add is also the position in terms of schools. As I talked about previously, in terms of the budget setting, we are in a privileged position in Swansea in terms of the level of our reserves. When you see neighbouring authorities, because I'm a sadder when I do read the reports, their reports coming in here showing a major overspends because they start with schools in negative reserves, and if they've got negative reserves they have to charge all of that to the general fund. So your assurance comes ultimately from the end product, but what you don't see is behind the scenes what happens on a monthly basis, and colleagues at all levels, at heads of service, director, know me very well and do brief me rapidly if anything appears out of the ether, unexpected or untoward, on top of that routine monitoring. So hopefully that gives you assurance, Councillor White.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Smith. That is very assuring, and that we have got such a robust measures in place. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Leader, do you want to say last comment on it?
Yeah. Just to add to what Mr. Smith said, I think we obviously do a tag team type oversight of this. from the political side of the House, not just in terms of my role as leader, but as Cabinet Member for Finance, I meet with all heads of service and directors on a rolling basis. I meet with all Cabinet members on a rolling basis, and again, triangulate the information that I glean then with Mr. Smith to ensure that oversight is there. As well as the formal structures that we have in the council then for regular meetings between Cabinet, CMT, to make sure that we do stay on top of any emerging issues and that we're able to make sure that we mitigate those as quickly as possible if they emerge. So again, just to say there's a comprehensive series of oversight as well as the formal structures that help us to try and maintain positions like this.
Thank you, Leader. Anyone else? Okay, can I then ask a few questions, please? Go to Appendix B, Mr. Smith. I'm amazed that I see that under Director of Corporate Services, AVCs, 156,000 savings estimated achieved from shared cost additional voluntary contribution scheme. How do you do that? How do you make savings on that?
So there's savings in the sense that because it is entirely dependent on which staff choose to take up a shared cost AVC scheme, the budget was set at naught. It was not prudent to budget for an assumed income for something that's entirely dependent on individuals making their own decisions. So it is the estimated pure cash flow as a result of people who have signed up to take advantage of salary sacrifice AVC schemes. Now, as a local government body with a defined benefit scheme, we are very limited in our ability to use it as individuals, and therefore the saving was never going to be large. And wasn't it remarkably prescient for me to never build it into the base budget as guaranteed income? Because I guarantee you at the moment it's gone completely by 2029, other than for the tuppences, because there are going to be changes at a national level which prevent people doing salary sacrifice on pension contributions and such like if they exceed £2,000 a year. I think it has a material impact on the private sector. It only has a very modest impact on us, and therefore I'm not rushing to build anything into the base budget. So that's why it's there as a windfall in year, and it will cease or near cease in a couple of years' time.
Thank you. On there's a couple of questions I want to ask on social services and on education, but I think it's only fair that we ask the actual directors of them for comments on it. The only other one is on the Director of Place, and I think this is one that we all need to consider. Economic Regeneration and Planning 1.160. The variation largely attributed to the shortfall in planning fee, which continues to underperform against budget expectations. I think we need to seriously think about that, because if we're not getting in the planning fees, that means people aren't investing. And that is quite a serious figure of 1.160 million. So I think we need to think about that in the future. The only other thing I'd pass comment on is the capital spend. I know you're delighted that it's so low, but it's 21%, which even for Q2 seems to be a little low. We're normally up a little bit more than that. So, Leader, you're going to pass comment on that?
Yeah, on both bits, if that's okay, Chair. Just in terms of the planning stuff, obviously there are impacts that we are seeing from NRW's recent position on nitrates and phosphates, etc., which potentially has an impact for lots of developments around the Lochar estuary and other parts of Wales. So again, there will be some impacts there in terms of fees. And again, we're trying our best, working as part of the task force with Welsh Government to try and navigate those issues. But yeah, I mean, look, there is a cycle, as you'll appreciate, as and when bigger developments come forward with their planning permissions. There are a pipeline of the next phase of schemes, for instance, in the city centre that will make their way through planning in due course, or to planning in due course. And again, they will attract the relevant fees as necessary. So it is a bit of peaks and troughs as we go. But yeah, you're right to raise the fact that we do need to keep an eye on that. Just in terms of the capital spend, as you can imagine, I'm quite exercised about that, but from a different position to Mr. Smith. I want to see the delivery taking place as speedily as possible. Although with my finance hat on, I do quite like the fact that we do have some additional headroom in financing as well. So I want the penny and the bun on this one, really. But you know, I am assured that the progress is being made on the schemes, and that both third and fourth quarter will show a significant improvement in terms of the capital spend and the progress being made on our major schemes.
Okay, thank you very much. Ben, you put your hand up.
Yes, mine's to come back on the planning fee one, as well as the volume which the leader has referred to. Don't forget that planning fees are a regulated matter that Welsh Government decides, and planning fees have been frozen for many, many years. And with effect from the 1st of December, there have been material increases on an all Wales basis, determined by Welsh Government to start doing some of the catch up in terms of it not having kept pace with real and true costs. So there was a material increase from the 1st of December. I think the average was about a 50% increase in planning fees mandated as a result of Welsh Government decisions. There is then a period of phasing to make sure that after the first material increase it stands still, but there is then a commitment that it will index up in line with inflation. You pay your money, your choice as to what inflation measure that is, but part of the shortfall, as well as volume, has been compounded by a freeze on planning fees, which was unwound and materially increased from the 1st of December. So you would not expect to see much material impact on that in the report. Well, you wouldn't see any at second quarter, and there'll be literally no impact come the third quarter. It'll be at year end that you'll see some of the turnaround in terms of those increasing fees. Welsh Government decision, whether that's popular with people who've got to pay the fees, that's a different matter, but that's not for me to answer, is it? I'm just giving you the officer technical advice, reminding you that there was a price component in there as well, Chair.
Okay, I think the problem with that is if there's a large increase, then that adds to the cost of any building or any extensions or any other projects. A gradual increase is the best way forward, not these large increases. But I am thank you for that. But it would be interesting to find out what the actual increase the Welsh Government put on that, and if we could have some sort of information on that, it would be. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
So again, Chair, on that one, I presume you'll write that in your letter and you can let the relevant head of service better answer. I've given you an overall position, but I assume that'll be in your follow-up letter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Leader?
Yeah, Chair, just on your last point, we'll definitely follow up in writing, as Mr. Smith has suggested. But just to reassure you, I think Welsh Government were quite clear that they wanted to make sure that any fees or any increase that was levied were appropriate to the planning process, and that there weren't perhaps additional cost loading placed on any fees that were there. And obviously that's the approach that Welsh Government ourselves have taken, which is legitimate costs associated with the planning application being reflected in the fees charged.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Black?
Yeah, I was going to make the same point as Ben has made about the fees going up in December. I think the other point need to bear in mind is, of course, that the fees actually effectively fund staffing within the planning department, and that while we're having a shortfall, then that's going to have an impact on performance in the planning department, and in terms of the amount of time it takes to determine planning applications, and also in terms of enforcement and other peripheral activities around planning as well. So I think it's important that this is dealt with as soon as possible.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else? No, if that's not the case, can I thank you all? Can I thank you, Leader? Can I thank you, Ben, for the item that we about the revenue and capital monitoring. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8 now, which is Q2 performance monitoring. Can I welcome Councillor Andrew Williams and Mr. Lee Wenham, who is the lead officer, head of communications. I'm not sure which one of you wants to go first, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll introduce it. Yeah, pleased to present the Q2 corporate performance report. This covers our progress to the end of September 2025. The report shows that Swansea Council remains broadly on track to deliver all 6 corporate wellbeing plans and objectives. The vast majority of our delivery steps, success measures and performance indicators are on target, despite the ongoing financial and operational pressures. Lee and I are happy to take questions, although we may have to defer to the relevant department if sort of more detailed information is required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I remind members that if there's a specific question regarding social services or education, we'll take the question today and send it to the appropriate head of service. Councillor Black?
Yeah, obviously there are issues in there around social services in particular, but that's, as you say, is something which is being dealt with, I think, by the various scrutiny panels involved in that. The question I had was on page 10, which is
Page 10.
I've got 10 at the bottom here. In terms of the percentage of council staff who have completed mandatory safeguarding training. It's in the first section of performance indicators, the second page. Currently, that stands at 69.06% when the target is 100%. Now, clearly, that is a matter of concern. So I wonder whether that could be taken back to the relevant officer and we can have an explanation as to why that is. I think we, as a scrutiny committee, we have actually looked at safeguarding and stuff and raised these issues, but I think it's important that we do make sure that all staff have that safeguarding training as soon as possible. And now that we have the means of monitoring that through the Oracle and stuff, I think it needs to be picked up quite quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Happy, Chair, to take that back to the head of HR. You may be aware we've now got a recently started head of HR, Lindsay Evans. I'll take this up with her today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. Are there any other questions? No? If not, can I thank you both for coming, present the report. Can I move on to the next item, which is the work plan? Are there any questions on the work plan? No? Okay. Item 10 then is the letters. Again, any questions on the letters? If not, then can I, just before we go, can I remind members the next meeting is a 2 p.m. start on Tuesday, the 19th of February. It's the pre-decision scrutiny for budget, where we have reports from the various other scrutiny boards, which will culminate in us going to, or me going to the cabinet with our scrutiny take on the budget. So our next meeting, 2 p.m. start on Tuesday, the 19th of February. I do apologise to you all. Rachel's put her hand up. It's her fault, but I should have checked it as well. So I can't blame her. Can I thank the people who are a bit more observant than we are? So it's Tuesday, the 17th of February, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning.
Thank you.